Network service of the NTA.
It happened this morning. The first conversation on the power of sports and diplomacy to change the world. What does this really mean? Three special persons from the United States and Tanzania were guests of the Nigerian Institute of International Affairs, the Federal Ministry of Youth and Sports, in partnership with the National Council of Arts and Culture, MTN, and of course, Africa's largest television network, NTA. They are here tonight to throw some light on this new project. I am Segun Odegbami, Speaker of the Sports Parliament, coming to you live from our studios here in Lagos. I'm glad to be back here. Sitting with me in Parliament tonight are from Ibadan, Waheed Ekun. Waheed, how are you? Good evening.
I'm happy to be here on stage tonight, and I want to congratulate you for a wonderful program you had this morning.
And of course, the doctor in the house, Kweku Tando.
Good evening, Mr. Speaker. Good evening, fellow parliamentarians, and good evening, Nigeria. Good evening, the rest of Africa.
Well, I don't know who else is there with us. I can't see very clearly. But after the break, you are in for a treat tonight. Join us after the break.
It's the dawn of a new era on NTA's flagship program, the Sports Parliament, revitalized with lots of varieties, including feedback responses from viewers. Sports Parliament, the weekly sports show that exposes all the intrigues in the Nigerian sports sector and projects an agenda on the way forward for Nigerian sports. On NTA every Thursday at 10:30 p.m., running for 1 whole hour, discussing sports. The parliamentarians are more committed than ever to enlighten the viewers as the Sports Parliament takes it to a whole new level on the floor of the House. Keep a date with the Sports Parliament as motions are moved every Thursday on the floor of the House. Mr. Speaker, with his gavel to harmonize sports resolutions. The House have it.
Greatest pleasure to welcome our guests tonight on the show. From the right, former national coach of Nigeria. Believe me, he actually coached the national team of Nigeria. Not once, not even twice. International coach of several countries all over the world. The man who was stoutly behind the success of one of Africa's greatest middle distance runners, Philbert Bayi of Tanzania. I have the pleasure of welcoming Mr. Ron Davis.
Thank you, Segun. It was a pleasure and an honor to be here tonight.
I like your jersey.
Thank you. It was a nice little gift from you, and I'm enjoying it. And I had to wear it tonight, but it's good to see you, man, and nice to be on your show again.
Very good. And sitting very close to me here is a first-class scholar. His name is Professor Ikawemba Banting. He is the director of the Walimu Nyerere. You remember Julius Nyerere? Walimu Nyerere Foundation in Tanzania. He's a historian. He's a gorilla Pan-Africanist. You're welcome to the show.
Thank you very much, Segun. It's an honor to be here. Pleasure to be here, actually. Yeah, and thank you for today as well. It's been wonderful.
Fantastic. And to my left, a scholar also. I describe him as one of the foremost sports marketing experts in the world, a historian, a Nigerian, an American. Just listen to him and you'll be blown. Idorein Uyo. He's a Nigerian and an American. Welcome to the show, brother.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you for today. A lot of energy in the room, a lot of enthusiasm, great questions, just phenomenal, very phenomenal production. Thank you for putting this together for us.
Well, you have just whetted the appetite of Africans who are watching tonight's show. So sit back and for the next 3 minutes, see what our crew of NTA that covered the proceedings live put together for your enjoyment. Sit back and watch this. And at the airport, it was all a sea of blackheads. A sea of blackheads. Because, as you heard them say, 27 African countries, all their athletes had been bungled out of the Olympic Village and asked to depart immediately.
Setting the conceptual tone by Nigeria ex-international Segun Odegbami was a good foundation for the conversation meant to seek solution to the challenges of an average African man. Efforts of different leaders across board over the years using different sectors of the economy seems futile. This call for the advocacy of different groups that sport is actually the antidote to the challenges of the black race. Resource persons at the event recalled that many sports legends have used sports to resolve disputes, conflicts, wars, among many other vices. Dignitaries, including the Minister of Youth and Sports Development, Sunday Dare, also emphasized that sport is no longer a mere recreational activity, as thousands of youth are being empowered through sports, which is also a means of livelihood for multinational investors.
Nigeria must plug into the world of sports as business and sports as diplomacy. That our sportsmen and women are ambassadors, more powerful in their impact than even ambassadors plenipotentiaries that represent our country.
Sports can do it. We need to examine that possibility and explore that tool, which looks ordinary, on the surface. You think that it's not effective, but if you look deep, it is the most powerful tool in the world to use for development of the people, earning respect for your people with dignity, and earning the rightful place for all black people in the world. Through sports, we can do it.
I'm a member of the FIFA Council. Right now, we have a FIFA Council meeting. That's where I'm living now. But we also have a caucus meeting. And by God's grace, I'm in that caucus. What does that tell you? Nigeria is recognized. It's not about Amaju Pinnick. It's about the biggest black nation that accounts for 16% of African population. Do you understand what I'm saying? So it's not about me. It's about the recognition and respect they have for this country. But it's me and you that we amplify that for people to keep respecting us. It's not the negative image that we want to portray.
You cannot toy with sports. And that's the whole thing. It's to make Nigeria a sports brand, which we already are, but to strengthen that brand in how we then effectuate it and use it in furtherance of our national interests and foreign policy.
Stakeholders at the Sports Diplomacy Colloquium held at the Nigeria Institute of International Affairs, Lagos, unanimously agreed that only a united Africa can redeem its past or lost glory.
Welcome back. This is the Sports Parliament. If you missed that event this morning, you missed something, I tell you, because we are charting a new course in the world through sports and diplomacy. Let me go to Kweku Tando. I noticed he was there from start to finish of today's show. So, Parliamentarian Kweku, just give us your thoughts on what you experienced today.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And I must say it was a well-organized event. And for me, what was key was identifying the role of sports, the power of sports, as a diplomatic tool. And like was said at the event, it's a conversation that has started. And I believe that today's event has laid the foundation of that conversation. And going forward, we'll now begin to look forward to hearing things that would be pointers, solutions, way forwards in using the power of sports to effect diplomatic change in various ways, either positive diplomatic change or using sports to turn around negative perceptions, either about countries, about nations, about races, and also in using sports as a diplomatic tool to see how those countries that are using it as a tool can become ingrained in the business of sports, because that's another aspect that needs to be fused together with the diplomatic aspect, the diplomacy aspect of it. So for me, it was a good start. The foundation has been laid, but going forward, I will expect that we'll now begin to identify particular solutions, particular points that we will now use to drive home not just the message this time, but the implementation of those things that have been agreed upon.
Well said. Wahid, anything to add?
Yes, I'm happy to be part of the program today. I wasn't in Lagos, but I was in Ibadan. I monitored the whole thing on Zoom. It was a spectacular event, and then I'm happy that we are starting to recognize the role of sports and diplomacy as a sports vehicle to drive home diplomacy in Africa. That's very good development, and I'm happy at the participants and all the speakers at the event. And I hope they will be able to highlight how sports can be used to solve some problems in Africa or all over the world, and the diplomatic tools that sports could be used for. So these are very important and ingredients that I'm looking forward to as we progress in the conversations on the quarterly basis. I wish all of us success in the race that we are embarking upon now.
Yeah, well, thank you. It is actually the first step in a marathon journey. It's a marathon, yeah. It's the first step.
It's a marathon.
And we still have a long ways to go. But that first step needed to be taken, and we have taken it today.
Yes.
And every 3 months, on a quarterly basis, the conversations will continue. We will crystallize our thoughts, articulate them properly, start to design strategies, a plan, and how to implement, and so on and so forth. But let me come here to my distinguished friends from all over the world, from Tanzania. Let me start with Prof. Your own takeaway from today's event.
Well, I'm in concert with the comments from the parliamentarians, and I think it was a very positive and a very good first step to take. The potential that's there was obvious as well. Even the level of participation, having the minister there, the Director General of the Institute, the Nigerian Institute of International Affairs, their comments, their contributions were dynamic. Everyone is able to see the vision. That's what I think is the great thing. This first step set a vision, and that vision is very powerful. So I'm 100% behind what you're trying to do, and enthralled with the potential that it represents for Africa and African people.
Ron, as you go back to Tanzania and you team up again with Philbert Bayi in the school there. So what do you go back with?
And I go back with Ika too. And, so he's going to stay on my case. But today, I sit there thinking how, Segun, what you are trying to do is history. I go by the principle everything must change, change is constant. And I felt unity today in the room. It was, everybody was like so attentive and just into everything that ID was saying, what Ika was saying. Unfortunately, I got a little bit time factor in there. I got cut off from my time, but I mean, what you're doing is so far ahead of its time right now that it's brilliant in a way that you're doing something that is long overdue. And I think that now you have started something new that really needs to be done. I mean, we Africa needs to unite, and I'm sitting here with the medal table from Tokyo Olympics in 2020. The African diaspora dominated the medal total.
When you say African diaspora, what do you mean?
I'm including black people from around the world.
Okay.
Whether it's the Caribbean, America, or whatever, you know,
Yeah.
Australia.
The number of medals
Aborigine,
that
that were won by,
blacks.
when you put it all together, and
Yeah.
African athletes. So it was 200, you know, 50 gold, 65 silver, 85 bronze, and the closest country to it was United States with 113. So when you look at that situation, if we had unity with it, and again, this is something else that I think is very important too, that we got to look at why is the exodus going on for athletes to go and compete with other countries. And that's an issue right now that back in your day or when I was coaching here before, the athletes were proud to run for the country and be a part of the country. And I think at that time there was more investment going on too for the athletes. You know, Bonvita, allowances every month, equipment. That needs to be looked at again. And I just think that you really started something historical today that's going to really pay off in the long run for Africa and black people all around the world.
Where do I start with ID? You mesmerized.
Thank you, Segun. Just to echo what the other panelists have said. So this isn't something new. Nigerians have long been playing a very, very important role in global sport. It's not just something that started today. So today was the beginning of the conversation, but by no means the beginning of the rightful place of the country. Nigerians are a sports-crazed, sports-loving nation. And if you look at the role that the country has played across the continent, from leading the 1976 Olympic boycott because of apartheid, it took the nation of the size, influence, and wealth of Nigeria to be able to coalesce that to make it work. If you look at the talent that is infusing global sports leagues around the world, it is in fact dominated by Nigerians as far as the diaspora is concerned. So for a very long time, Nigeria has played a very prominent role in the global sports landscape. So the question now is, what's the next step? Now, there is all kinds of talent at the grassroots level. And so working to commercially and athletically exploit that is going to be something that needs to be discussed and looked at. By commercially exploit, I am talking about sponsorship, marketing, athlete development, etc. Some of those core disciplines. And I will say this, that the education part is very important because sports doesn't stand alone. You will need the engagement of other structures, infrastructure, education, culture, nutrition, kinetics, all these things that data, mathematics, all these things now flow into the realm of sport. So it's not just competing on the basketball court or on the football pitch. There are several additional dimensions that are now part of the sports business. It is why the global sports business by the year 2030 will be worth nearly $1 trillion. So if you look at that, that means that sports ranks alongside manufacturing, telecommunications, oil and gas, banking and finance. Sports needs to be considered in that vein along with those other industry verticals. So for me, today was fantastic. You had a lot of energy in the room. And if you notice, people stayed through the end. You didn't have people leaving. They stayed through the end. And so my hope is that they took one or two things away. And as the conversation develops, perhaps we can continue building on the foundation that was started today. Thank you.
Wow.
I want to add one thing.
Yeah.
You covered quite a bit, Professor ID.
I'm not a professor, but okay.
Yeah, we're gonna make you one. You're so far out there, but sports to me is the morale of the people. When you have sports, the success, we go back to, as you talked about today, when the under 23 Nigerian Olympic team won the gold medal. when you talk about people like Bikila from Ethiopia, who was the first African to win a gold medal in the Olympic Games, and you start looking at what that did for Ethiopia and where Ethiopia is today. And again, Phil Goodbye, right now we're working on getting his book done because, again, that's another point. We need to put that message out there and not forget about all these great athletes like Kino, John Akiboa, and Segun himself, about the history of sports. We don't have any information around. We can't go to a library and get this kind of information. And I think it's important that the youth start reading about the great history that has happened in the African Revolution in sports. And, I think that's important because, let's say, what happened with the Nigerian team in 1996 Olympic Games, it did morale for Africa, for black people. What Usain Bolt did for Jamaica, that was morale for Jamaica. I was in Germany when he broke Berlin, Germany, when he broke the 3 world records at the World Athletic Championship, for example. As we left the stadium, there were Germans riding around the city with Jamaican flags hanging out. That's the effect that sports can have, and I think that's what
you said something about
Yes.
the key to all of this being unity.
Oh yeah,
Africa
definitely.
unified.
Yeah.
With all the crisis and conflict in Africa, Prof,
Yes.
how would sports
contribute
contribute to the resolution
Good
of
point.
the conflicts and crises in Africa?
On every team, actually someone asked me that this afternoon, and thank you for bringing it up, Shagun, because we can't let that pass. On every team within a nation, it's mixed with ethnicities from all over the country. It's not just one area or one group. So even at the sub-level of the nation, you have already this bringing together of different people from different communities, different cultural backgrounds. Then when you move into the continental level, the same thing happens. The idea of a team, if we can take that the small team and the concept of working together to accomplish a goal and extend that into the arena of diplomacy and international relations, and then rooting it in sports, the competition aspect becomes secondary to the purpose of unity. It's almost like you compete in order to unify. So who can be the best unifier? Who can bring people and galvanize support and galvanize that energy, that dynamism of love for the continent, love for African people as a sportsman? I want to mention this because I thought it was so brilliant. And again, when Ron mentioned this word brilliant, kudos to you. It is a brilliant idea. It's forthsightful. A few weeks ago, I read an article on the internet about the mixed martial artist Usman and Adesanya. And the article started off in a negative tone. Usman prices himself out of a payday, a big payday, because he set his price at 100 million naira. But when $100 million US dollars, $100 million US dollars. But reading the article, his position is exactly what we're talking about. And he said, it's better to have 2 Nigerians with championships, world championships, as opposed to 1 Nigerian with 2 world championships.
Yeah.
And then he said, Adesanya is my little brother. I love him. And give us the 100 million and we will split it evenly as brothers, 50 million each. When I read that, I said, this man is brilliant. He's intelligent. He's intelligent in speaking to the sports industry and understanding that the dynamics of owners and the way it goes. And a lot of times the athletes have to really fight to get their respect and their propers in that area. And then also understanding the message and the significance right now of seeing these black men dominating basically what's becoming a new sport in terms of global appeal. And if we extend that, just think, for example, Antetokounmpo, Milwaukee, the NBA, championship, most valuable player. If he were to come out and say something like that, do you know the impact and how that would resonate? And then mention all of my brothers and sisters on the continent. It would unify, it would galvanize, it would create that morale that Ron is mentioning, and an energy that the end of it, we can actually see our objectives and our dreams and our aspirations for our people and our continent.
Excellent.
Well, Kweku, you know, you've been listening in, and something just struck me that I wanted you to comment on.
Okay.
Yeah, after we go on our break. So, you know, we go and compete as athletes. We just go and compete as athletes, we win medals, and then we just disappear. We don't leave a message, because we as athletes are not giving a message beyond just the sport, that our participation could actually influence so many things beyond sports. Kweku, your thoughts before we go on our break.
Yeah, thank you. Quickly, let me just say two things that came to my mind as the discussions were going on, and then I'll come to your question. The first thing that struck me is, and I think it was when the professor, I can't recall his name now.
Professor Bunting.
No, the other man, the gentleman.
Uyo.
Uyo, yes. When he was talking about the importance of sports marketing and building sports as a business, I realized that for sports to be effective as a diplomatic tool, it has to be successful. In other words, it's not just any sport or any sportsman that can be effective in diplomacy. If the sport is not successful, then you cannot translate it to becoming a diplomatic tool. So it's important for us to get the content of our sports right. And that is where you're talking about marketing, athlete development, sponsorships, and so on and so forth. So our conversations should also take that into consideration, that we are talking about successful sports. In other words, we're talking about successful athletes in sports who can now use the sports medium as a diplomatic tool. That's the first thing I wanted to say. Then the second thing also is I'm looking at the story of George Weah and seeing how we can fashion a conversation to show the effectiveness of a successful sports person transforming into a national president. I think that is a great example of the power of sports in diplomacy. And so that story needs to be told as well. So coming to Bishop's question about what athletes can do, they just participate and they fizzle out. I think that has to do with the kind of content we give to the athletes when we're talking about athlete development. Sports and education, for example, we cannot divulge those two. It comes to play when we're talking about taking it to another level. So the kind of content we have in our athlete development programs would have to be tweaked to ensure that not just does the athlete participate, but the athlete understands that I'm taking part in this sport because I'm also a voice, either in my country, in my community, and so on and so forth, especially when I am successful.
Fantastic. Well, we'll go on a short break. When we come back, we'll continue with the conversation after the break.
And there's the start. And promises to Shara. Winds up that right hand.
Archbishop of basketball, goal! He hung on that net like a stalk up a tree. NTA Sports 24 brings you all sports, all time and all day. Tune in to watch NTA Sports 24 on Star Times Channel 270, StarSat on Channel 434 and Free TV on Channel 731. NTA Sports 24, where sports thrive.
Welcome back. This is the Sports Parliament. One question that all Nigerians will not forgive me for, if I don't ask ID here, is the issue of funding of sports in Nigeria. I know that if you want to discuss it, it will take a whole course in a university. But you have 2 minutes to just give us your thoughts on how can we, just tell us something about that area.
Yeah, so as one of the parliamentarians talked about marketing, the commercial appeal of sports, every country, every region is different. And there is nowhere else that's like Nigeria. An abundance of talent, an abundance of resource. So then how to funnel and channel those resources towards sporting development then becomes a challenge. When you go to solicit for sponsorship from a company, a corporate, or an organization, you have to think to yourself, what am I giving in return? Why would this corporate or this company decide to sponsor me in my sporting event? That company, first and foremost, has a fiduciary responsibility to its shareholders to turn a profit. That is why that company exists. It does not exist to fund your sporting event. So, if you want them to fund your sporting event, you have to give them a reason to do so. Also, mind you, before you even got there to solicit the sponsorship, the funding, the financial ask, request, 10 other people have already come before you that day. And they've already said no to those other 10. Why would they say yes to you? So as we solicit funding and partnership for sports in Nigeria, you have to look at it from the corporate's perspective. Why would they fund this particular sport initiative? And you have to give them a reason to do so. And usually that reason would be aligned with the corporate objectives. So you would need to know, is it developing a particular target market that corporate is concerned with? So for example, are they targeting, say, children between the ages of 15 and 18, which means invariably the parents must now be involved, and so on. So as you're putting together a funding strategy for a corporate or anybody else, you need to understand what that corporation is targeting. What is it that pains the corporation? What keeps them up at night? And then you structure your proposal to map into that agenda so that you are using your athlete, your sport, to help them meet a corporate objective. And at that point, they will invite you in to have a serious discussion. Without that, you're just going to have maybe every now and then a corporate gives you a little money to do one or two things, but it's not sustainable. So it becomes a transactional relationship instead of a partnership. It does take work. So that is number one. Number two, the issue of transparency. It cannot be ignored. It is the elephant in the room, and we have to talk about it. There is a lack of trust, and I'm not saying anything new that anybody already doesn't know. But it's also not a problem that is unique to Nigeria. It's not just Nigeria that suffers this, right? So how is it then that you position and structure your pitch in such a way that you'll be able to manage the transparency issue? Because that is an issue. And then finally, as you look at funding, consider non-traditional sources. Get creative. All of this is doable, but it takes work. It is very, very difficult anywhere in the world to solicit funding. And as one of our esteemed parliamentarians had said, you have to be successful at your craft. Cristiano Ronaldo, every time, and I mentioned this morning, every time he posts on Instagram, he makes $975,000. Let me repeat that. Every time Cristiano Ronaldo posts on Instagram for a corporate, that post is worth a minimum of $975,000. Me, I post for free, and they even charge me data, right? I have to pay for the data to post, right? I don't get that. And the reason is because he has such a massive following, because he has been successful for over 20-something years, and he's a global icon. So because of that, he is so marketable that anything he touches, there will be a brand association to that. So what I am trying to say is, if you are successful within your sport, then, or if you have potential in your sport, then there's a good chance that if you're able to align your sponsorship proposal with a corporate objective, you have a better chance in giving them a letter and saying, here, fund my project. That usually doesn't work.
Prof, with the state, you want to add something to that?
Yeah. What about the government used to invest a lot in sports? I mean, back in the day, you had the National Sports Commission here in Nigeria that was self-sufficient. I mean, they even had a car service place that they would give the coaches cars every 2 years, new cars, Volkswagens, federal government license on it. Now they would sponsor the athletes. They would support the athletes with equipment,
with scholarship,
bonvita, allowance, and then of course where we were having the athletes, they encouraged the accommodations. I think the government also needs to play their role in all of this too, because I think that's where we're losing, you know, by concentrating on the corporation. We're not going to get another a Ronaldo all the time. I mean, I'm not disagreeing with you. You're right. But the government also needs to get back to investing more.
Yeah, so I agree. So in the U.S., there is no Ministry of Sports, as you know, right? It's mostly private sector driven. However, government has a place to play in sport development, but it shouldn't lead. It has a place to play, but it shouldn't lead. The private sector has to lead. A place like Nigeria, as you pointed out, cannot be private sector driven only because it doesn't have the environmental maturity as of yet. In other words, the conditions on the ground cannot support a privately funded sports only model. So government has a place to play for sure. They just shouldn't lead the effort. So government would put together policy. You need infrastructure, you need roads, you need export waivers on sports equipment and things like this. So government has a very big role to play, for sure.
Well, you are more into politics, conflict resolution, peace. So you know the state of Africa, as it were, most of Africa, the state of Africa. And when I hear corporates and stuff, and you know how bad things are in those countries, tell us, how bad are the situation, or how bad is the situation in Africa generally to allow for sports to thrive and for us to achieve the objectives we are stating?
The idea of success, and I want to, I'll come to your question, but I want to chip in where Ivy and Ron were going. If you look at the United States of America, they have sports teams for 3-year-olders and 4-year-olders and 5-year-olders. City councils support it, which is state. Scholarships, you mentioned scholarships. The state universities that are funded by tax dollars, which means it's public, give those scholarships. Today when I mentioned that I was at university, Ron went to university, said he had 100 scholarship offers. That money's particularly for public schools, state universities.
When you say public, that's government.
Government.
So government actually
plays a role in that. You have to recognize that.
Right.
In the 1960s, President John Kennedy, I can't remember the name of the program, but it was, he had the whole country exercising. Physical fitness, yeah. It was some, there was some fitness president's...
the presidential seal for physical fitness.
For physical fitness. And you had tests in schools.
In schools, I did that.
Yeah, you had tests in schools. Everyone had to take physical education. You had to take a shower. You had to do these things like that.
Everybody would be healthy.
If you would get an F if you didn't participate. You would fail physical education.
And it wasn't easy. I mean, you had to climb a rope, climb rope climbing or do the
so many
the
push-ups,
bars.
so many pull-ups,
Yeah, so many
this,
everything.
right?
Interesting.
All of these things. So it gave a foundation. At the universities, television contracts to broadcast games, we're talking hundreds of millions of dollars. The problem is the athletes don't get any of that money. Coaches get the money, the corporates get the money, the school get the money. The athletes have very little that they actually survive
They get the
on.
scholarships.
The scholarship to study, but they can't survive in school with the allowances that they get. So these are issues to be worked out. But the success has to begin with that type of attitude that where you get the whole nation to be participating in these activities. Now, in relationship to corporates in Africa, most of the investment is extractive. They're taking things out. This thing called, let us say, AGOA, the African American Growth and Opportunity Act, most of the things that come from those investments are taken out of Africa and the profits accrue externally. So that's going to be something that would be a challenge. The other one is, why would they invest here and then you become the competitor for them wherever they are? China has a different approach. The government invests. And they are the fastest growing, and they're competing. Even Chinese sprinters now are coming up. And it's almost, you look at the sprint line and you see Jamaicans, African Americans, British, Africans who are living in England. And then there's the one Chinese sprinter there. And this is an indication of how that government is putting money into sport. The resources have to be there. That you can't get around that. But where they come from, it has to be, I think, this from both sides. From the private sector, led by the government, and serving the people, and not the profit incentive.
He said government should not lead, but you are saying
government should lead.
Well, Waideku, what do you think? You are just sitting there and listening to us. What do you think?
Yes, I'm finding the discussion interesting because the experts are talking, and when experts talk, you listen attentively. So I enjoyed the whole lot, and that's where the discussion is very good, because when there's a discussion, there's likely to be a controversy. Like the prof said, the prof Uyo, the Nigerian American said.
I'm surprised.
Yes, that government should not lead, they can participate. And my professor from Tanzania is even saying the government can lead the private sector into some actions. So that's the beauty of discussion we're having tonight, and I'm enjoying it very much. I want to believe in Nigerian sports. The private sector is not yet matured enough to take the big role they're supposed to play, and that's why the government is very much pronounced in the activities of sports in this country. I don't think the role of government in sports is that government should take over the running of sports. No, they should not take over the running of sports. It should be taken over by the private sector. But who are the private sector personnel? Who are the private sector structure to take over the running of sports? So that is the lacuna the government is actually taking advantage of by playing the role they are playing. By the time we have this kind of conversations on a quarterly basis, we'll be able to advise what government should be doing and what government should not be doing, and what private sector should be doing to take over the rightful place they're supposed to play in sports. And then particularly when we have competitions, athletes participate in tournaments, in competitions whatsoever, but they are not given the say and the opportunity to express their belief in a certain aspect. They should make athletes, particularly the athlete champions, to be able to speak on some aspects they believe in. That is where they can have a voice, and the voice can can be implemented
in society.
in the affairs.
In society,
Yes.
you are absolutely right. So we're coming to the end of tonight's show. Let me give Ron 1 or 2 minutes to just round up your thoughts for tonight and for today's event.
Yeah, I think you know, and again, with the work you're doing, it's going to lead to a lot of research and a lot of awareness on these problems that you started today. And again, my whole thing is that I think the models for Africa is so different than the rest of the world. I mean, the government, and I always go back to the National Sports Commission. That to me, they had the most advanced program in Africa. That's why it was so successful.
Say that again. The National Sports Commission had the most advanced program.
They had the most advanced national director of sports, everything. And they were self-sufficient. And they were successful. I mean, they hired us. We had coaches coaching in, I was in Benin City. You had coaches in Kaduna. You had coaches in Calabar. And Lee was in Ibadan and Ife and Ibadan. And we could bring athletes into camp, and they were taken care of by the National Sports Commission, and that was our success. That's what led to the team being the first team in Africa to defeat Kenya in track and field, and that was huge because previously in 1973, I think Nigeria only won 1 or 2 medals in the All-Africa Championships, and Kenya was dominating athletics up until that time. I think that needs to be examined again. And what made that whole era successful with the football team, the basketball team, boxing. They had Archie Moore here with Hogan Kid Bassie, and it was success everywhere. You know, I always, even when I was talking today about Algeria, you know, we were all our morale was high because what was it around the whole Nigeria? Green and white is everywhere.
Wow. Just
green and white
is
everywhere. Yeah.
Thank you for reminding us.
Yeah, the green and white was everywhere.
Now it's Niger. We call it Niger.
Yeah, it was everywhere. That's all you could hear.
Well, you have your 1 minute. 1 minute now.
I don't know if we're repeating ourselves or what, but this dichotomy between private sector, it's not only in sports, private sector or state, it's across the board in everything we're doing on the continent and in the world. This thrust for the neoliberal paradigm to privatize everything in social activities, privatize education, privatize medicine, this privatization it has its downside. The potential for the government, and what you did today, this was state, even though you're parastatal, it's state. And if you sell it off, you lose control, you lose purpose, you lose direction. And if we're talking about sports diplomacy for peace and unity in Africa, to silence the guns, I'll end with a question, because they might be out there. What corporation will finance that?
Big question.
Well, I look at it. Two things. I look at it from a little different perspectives. Governments change, and so oftentimes what we struggle with in this part of the world is the continuity, right? The new government comes in, and then you have to start all over again. So meanwhile, you're already halfway down this path of success on a project, and then it gets terminated for whatever reason. So I guess for me, there's not one solution that fits all. If I am referring to the Nigerian circumstance, government has a big role to play, a policy framework, infrastructure, security, diplomacy, etc. However, my personal belief is that sports needs to be driven by the private sector to ensure continuity and the continued commercial success. So you don't really see, sports is a function, but government can only do so much within the context of sport. Well, and for me, just to round up, every single sports league in the world has a pipeline to Nigeria. From American football to English Premier League to German league to, the best female volleyball player in the world is an Italian Nigerian.
Wow.
Yes. So The talent is here, the resources are here. We just need to figure out a way to coalesce, develop, grow it, and have some marketing and commercial success. Because, again, everybody else around the world recognizes what we have right here in Nigeria.
Kweku, move a motion for adjournment so we can see your beautiful, your handsome face for the last time tonight. Kweku. Oh, is Kweku there?
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yes, I'm here. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This session has been very educative. And I just want to move a motion that the conversation that has started today must continue, not just at this level, but right from state level, national level, even local government level. Let's have a conversation on sports diplomacy, the power of sports and business, and let's see where it will lead us to. And I just want to move a motion that this becomes a national discourse, not just in Nigeria, but in the entire Africa.
Well,
so I move.
That has been moved. All those in favor of that motion say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those against say nay. The ayes have it.